The silent line. I've spent 12 years working as a dispatcher in a windowless room in rural Ohio. You get used to the static. You get used to the panic. After a while, the voices of strangers bleeding out or screaming for help just become data points. You process them, you send the units, and you hang up. But on a Tuesday in October, the static sounded different. The call came in at 3:14 a.m. Usually that's the hour of drunk drivers or elderly falls. When I clicked the line open, there was no screaming, just the heavy, rhythmic sound of someone breathing. Not panicked breathing, deliberate. "May 1, what is your emergency?" I asked. My voice was professional, calm. "She has your eyes, Sarah," the voice whispered. My stomach didn't just drop, it turned to ice. "My name isn't on the public dispatch logs." And then he said the address. Not the address of a crime scene, but my own home on Willow Creek Road. "She's wearing the yellow pajamas tonight," he continued, his voice like sandpaper on silk. "The ones with the little clouds. She's sleeping so soundly. It's almost a shame to wake her." I didn't follow protocol. I didn't keep him on the line. I dropped my headset, grabbed my keys, and screamed at my supervisor that I had to go. I drove home at 90 miles an hour, the world blurring into a smear of gray trees and moonlight. The encounter. When I pulled into my driveway, the front door was wide open. I ran inside, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it felt like it would break. I flew up the stairs to my 7-year-old daughter's room. Maya was there. She was asleep. She was wearing the yellow pajamas with the clouds. I stood over her, gasping for air, when I heard a floorboard creak in the hallway behind me. I turned around. He was standing there. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man. He looked ordinary, middle-aged, wearing a tan work jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. But his eyes were empty. There was no anger in them, just a cold, terrifying vacuum. "You don't remember me," he said. It wasn't a question. 4 years ago, the wreck on Highway 12. My wife was trapped. You told me help was coming. You told me to stay on the line. You told me she'd be okay. He took a step closer. I reached for the lamp on the nightstand, my hands shaking. "The ambulance was late, Sarah," he whispered. 6 minutes late. I watched her go cold while you told me to keep breathing. He didn't attack me. He didn't lung. He just reached out and brushed a stray hair away from Maya's forehead. I lunged at him then, swinging the heavy brass lamp. It hit his shoulder, and he stumbled, but he didn't cry out. He just looked at me with a faint, sickening smile, backed out of the room, and disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. The aftermath. The weeks that followed were a blur of adrenaline and exhaustion. The police did what they could, which was next to nothing. There were no fingerprints, no forced entry, just the word of a traumatized mother against the shadows. They told me he was likely a grief-stricken floater, someone who blamed the system and would eventually move on. I didn't believe them. I stopped working. I moved Maya's bed into my room. I installed 3 different bolt locks on every door and a ring of cameras that broadcasted every angle of the house to my phone. I became a prisoner of my own vigilance. I stopped sleeping. Every time the wind rattled a shingle or the house settled, I was upright with a kitchen knife in my hand, staring at the monitor. Maya started to change too. She became quiet, sullen. She asked why she couldn't play in the yard. I couldn't tell her that a man with empty eyes was out there, waiting for the clock to run out on those 6 minutes he felt I owed him. The vanishing. 3 weeks ago, I finally thought I could breathe. It was a bright, clear Monday. The police had patrolling the neighborhood regularly, and I hadn't seen a sign of the tan jacket in 20 days. Maya was falling behind in school, and her teacher insisted that the routine would be good for her. I drove her myself. I watched her walk through the front doors of the elementary school. I sat in the parking lot for an hour, just watching the entrance. At 3 p.m., I was at the pickup line. I was the first car. The bell rang. Children poured out like a flood of color and noise. I watched for the purple backpack. I watched for the blonde ponytail. 5 minutes passed. 10. The crowd thinned. The buses pulled away. My daughter didn't come out. I ran into the office. I was hysterical, screaming her name. The principal tried to calm me down, but her face went pale when she checked the attendance log. "Sarah," she whispered. "Maya was checked out at 11:30 this morning for a doctor's appointment." "And I didn't check her out," I screamed. "I've been home. Who took her?" The secretary looked like she was going to faint. It was a man. He had the proper placard. He said he was your brother." "Maya." She ran right to him. She seemed to know him. The final silence. The police found my car in the school parking lot. They found the brother's signature on the sign-out sheet. It wasn't a name. It was just a series of numbers. 0600. That was 3 days ago. I'm sitting in Maya's room now. The house is silent. The cameras are still running, but there's nothing to see. The police have issued an Amber Alert, but they have no leads. No one saw the car he was driving. No one noticed the man in the tan jacket. An hour ago, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. No words, just a video file. I clicked it with trembling fingers. It's a fixed shot of a basement. It's clean, almost clinical. There's a small twin bed in the corner with a yellow comforter. Maya is sitting on the bed. She's eating a sandwich. She looks fine. She doesn't look scared. But then, a hand reaches into the frame. It's a man's hand. He gently strokes her hair, and she leans into the touch, looking up at someone off camera and smiling. He didn't kill her. He's doing something much worse. He's replacing me. I'm calling the police, but I know what's going to happen. The line will ring, a dispatcher will answer, and they will tell me that help is on the way. They will tell me to stay on the line. They will tell me everything is going to be okay. And I know better than anyone in the world that they are lying. I didn't want to go up there. My father had been doing it for 30 years, and his father before him. But when Dad's hip finally gave out last autumn, the responsibility of the North Acreage fell to me. We live in a part of northern Maine where the trees don't just grow, they crowd. Our property sits on a high, rocky ridge, separated from the main road by 4 miles of logging trails. It's a massive field of rye and tall grass, surrounded on all sides by old-growth pines that seem to lean inward, watching. "Keep the fire high, Elias," my father told me as I packed my bag. His voice was unusually thin. "The light isn't for you to see by. It's for them to see you. Just stay in the lookout, keep the flames fed, and don't go looking for whatever's snapping branches in the dark." I laughed it off. I was 22, and I didn't believe in things that lived between the trees. I was wrong. The first night, the lookout was a small wooden shack raised on stilts, sitting alone in the center of the field. Beneath it was a stone-lined fire pit that had been used for generations. To keep the fire going, I had to climb down a narrow ladder, add logs, then climb back up. The first few hours were peaceful. The wind was calm, and the firelight felt comforting. But around 2 a.m., everything changed. The forest went silent, not slowly, instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. I leaned over the railing, staring into the field. The moon barely showed, leaving the fire as the only light. That's when I noticed movement near the tree line. Something tall stood just beyond the reach of the glow. It didn't move like an animal. It didn't walk so much as shift, staying perfectly still when I focused on it. Too thin, too upright. Watching, I told myself it was a trick of the light, a shadow playing games. But it stayed there, facing the shack, The discovery. The next afternoon, while gathering firewood near the edge of the field, I found something strange beneath some old scrap metal, a small collection of personal items, things I recognized from my family's past, arranged carefully in a row. They weren't damaged, just placed there, like someone was studying them. I didn't tell my father. I started the fire early that night. As darkness settled in, the silence returned. Around midnight, I heard a dull, steady sound coming from beneath the shack. Something was standing in the fire pit. I leaned over the railing. The flames had burned low, and in the fading light, I saw it clearly. It stood calmly in the embers, untouched by the heat, looking up at me. Its shape was wrong. Too long, too still. Its head tilted slightly, mimicking my movement. I raised the shotgun and shouted, but my voice shook. It didn't react. Instead, it placed a long finger against one of the wooden supports and began to climb. The flicker. It moved in a way I can't properly explain. Slow, deliberate, unnatural. I slammed the shack door and locked it, backing into the darkness. The fire below went out and the light vanished. Something moved across the roof. Then fingers curled slowly into view at the small window near the ceiling, feeling along the wall as if searching. Then everything went quiet. I stayed frozen, barely breathing. That's when I felt cold air behind me. I remembered the crawl space in the floor. I hadn't secured it. The rug shifted. Fingers appeared at the edge of the opening. The thing rose slowly, stopping inches from my face. It didn't feel hostile. It felt curious. Then it spoke. Its voice was calm, familiar. My father's voice. "The fire's out, Elias," it said softly. "I told you not to let it die. I'm writing this now, huddled in the corner. It's still here. It hasn't moved. It's just watching, waiting. I think it wants me to fall asleep, and I don't know how much longer I can keep my eyes open." I've been working the graveyard shift at the regional dispatch center in Blackwood Creek for 12 years. You get used to the hum of the servers, the cold coffee, and the heavy silence of a small town sleeping. But there's one thing you never get used to: the feeling that someone is watching you through the headset. The static at 3:14 a.m. It started on a Tuesday in October. At exactly 3:14 a.m., my console lit up. The caller ID was blank, no name, just a string of zeros. When I picked up, there was no screaming, just the sound of heavy, rhythmic breathing and the faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of something wooden hitting a floor. 911, what is the address of your emergency? I asked. A child's voice, barely a whisper, came through the static. He's under the porch. He has the long knife. Then, the line cut. I traced the signal. It didn't come from a cell tower. It traced back to a physical landline at 402 Heritage Lane, the Miller estate. The problem is, that house hasn't had electricity or a functioning phone line since the late 80s. It's a rotted-out shell of a farmhouse 3 miles past the county line. The warning. The next morning, my supervisor, Bill, sat me down. He looked tired, more tired than usual. I saw the log from last night, he said, not looking me in the eye. Ignore it. If 402 Heritage pops up again, you disconnect. It's a glitch in the old copper wiring from the storm drains. Bill, it was a kid, I said. He sounded terrified. Bill finally looked at me. His hands were shaking slightly. The guy who had your desk before you, Marcus, he started recording those calls. He got obsessed. One night, he walked out of here mid-shift to check on the boy. We found his car parked in the driveway of that house, engine running, door open. We never found Marcus. The pattern. I tried to listen to Bill, I really did, but every night at exactly 3:14 a.m., the console would glow. I'd answer, and the audio was always the same. Night 3. The sound of glass breaking and a woman sobbing in the distance. Night 5. The child whispering, "He's in the kitchen now. I'm under the floorboards." Night 8. Just the sound of someone dragging something heavy across a wooden floor. I did some digging in the local archives. In July 1982, the Miller family was slaughtered in that farmhouse. The youngest son was never found. The police report mentioned a detail that wasn't public. The killer had used a wood-splitting maul. The thump, thump, thump I heard on the phone, it matched the rhythm of a person walking with a limp, dragging a heavy tool behind them. The calls weren't just glitches. They were a perfect audio loop of a massacre that happened 40 years ago. The bridge. Last night, the call felt different. The static was gone. The audio was crystal clear, as if the person was standing right next to me in the booth. "One," I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I'm here. It's so cold under here," the child's voice said. But then, the voice glitched. It deepened, becoming distorted and wet. Tell Bill I found the boy." My blood turned to ice. That wasn't the Miller kid. That was Marcus, the dispatcher who disappeared 2 years ago. "Marcus?" I stammered. "Where are you?" "I'm in the walls," the voice replied. It sounded like he was smiling. "But he's not looking for me anymore. He's looking for the person on the other end of the line." The unresolved reality. I looked at the monitor. Usually when a call is active, you see the signal bouncing, but the screen was dead. The headset was unplugged from the console. I was holding the cord in my hand, yet the voice of Marcus was still vibrating inside my ear cups. Then, I heard it. Not through the headset, but from the hallway behind me. Thump, 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 the sound of something. Heavy being dragged across the linoleum floor of the dispatch center. We are a secure facility. The doors are reinforced steel. Nobody gets in without a key card. I looked at the security feed for the main entrance. The hallway was empty, but the motion sensor lights were clicking on, one by one, leading straight to my cubicle. I sat very still, staring at the dark reflection in my computer monitor. In the glass, I could see the row of empty desks behind me. And there, standing in the shadows of the break room doorway, was a figure. He was wearing a filthy yellowed rain slicker and a mask made of what looked like dried gray leather. He wasn't moving. He was just holding an old rotary telephone handset to his ear, staring at me. My headset crackled one last time. It wasn't Marcus. It was my own voice, recorded from 30 seconds ago, saying, 911, I'm here. The figure in the reflection slowly began to lift a heavy, rusted maul off the floor. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just closed my eyes and waited for the line to go dead. The police found my headset on the floor the next morning. The coffee was still warm, but the logs for 3:14 a.m. were completely empty. I didn't take the job for the money. I took it because I needed a place where the air was thin and the silence was thick. The position was for a structural watchman at a decommissioned grain elevator in a corner of Nebraska that most maps seem to forget. It was a massive concrete monolith rising out of the flat, dead cornfields. My job was simple: sit in the glass-walled office at the very top, check for structural shifts or copper thieves, and stay off the radio unless it was an emergency. The supervisor who drove me out there, a man named Miller, didn't say much. But before he left, he handed me a handheld radio and pointed to the dial. Channel 4 is for me, he said. Anything else you hear on the other frequencies, just turn the volume down. The atmosphere out here does strange things to old signals. You'll hear echoes. Just ignore them. I should have asked what he meant by echoes. Instead, I just nodded and watched his truck kick up dust until he disappeared into the horizon. The first week, the first few days were fine. It was just me, my books, and the wind whistling through the concrete chutes. But by Thursday, the echoes started. I was heating up some soup when the radio crackled. It wasn't static, it was a voice. It sounded like a woman crying for help, but the cadence was off. She would say "help me" every 10 seconds exactly. It was too rhythmic, like a recording on a loop. I remembered Miller's warning and turned the volume to 0. That night, I woke up to a sound coming from the floorboards. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't a mouse. It sounded like someone was underneath the floor, hitting the concrete with a heavy, wet bag of flour. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, the sound stopped. A moment later, I heard a voice. It wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from the stairwell door, just a few feet from my bed. "Hey buddy, you awake?" I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. It was my brother, Caleb, the problem was. Caleb had died in a car accident 3 years ago. The voice had that same raspy edge he got when he'd been smoking too much. It was perfect. "Caleb?" I whispered before I could stop myself. "Yeah," the voice replied from behind the heavy steel door. "It's freezing out here. Open up." I reached for the door handle, my hands shaking. But then, I stopped. I remembered the way Caleb talked. He never called me buddy. He called me by my nickname, Kid. The thing behind the door didn't know that. "Caleb," I said, my voice cracking. "What's my name?" Silence. Then, the voice changed. It didn't become a monster's growl. It stayed as Caleb, but it started repeating the word "open" over and over again, faster and faster, until it sounded like a machine gun. "Open, open, 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 open." I backed away into the corner of the office, clutching a kitchen knife. The scratching started then, not on the door, but on the glass windows 60 feet above the ground. The stairwell. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By Saturday, the isolation was starting to warp my mind. The radio stayed silent, but the air in the room felt heavy, like it was being squeezed. I decided I couldn't stay. I didn't care about the contract or the money. I needed to get to my car. I grabbed my bag and slowly cracked the door to the stairwell. The air that hit me was freezing and smelled like wet earth. I began the long walk down the spiral metal stairs. I was halfway down, passing the 3rd floor, when I heard it. "Please, don't leave yet." It was my own voice. It wasn't a recording. It was me, but from 10 minutes ago, sounding scared and tired. "I didn't take the job for the money," the voice whispered from the darkness below me. It was reciting the exact words I had thought to myself when I first arrived. I stepped back, my boot clanging against the metal. From the shadows of the floor below, something began to move. It wasn't a ghost. It was a man. Or at least, it had the shape of one. He was wearing a tattered yellow rain slicker, but the way he moved was wrong. His limbs didn't seem to have the right amount of joints. When he stepped into the dim light of the stairwell, I saw his neck. It was too long, tilted at an impossible angle, as if it had been broken and reset by an amateur. It, didn't have a face. Just a smooth, tight layer of skin stretched over bone, with 2 small slits where a nose should be. It lunged. It didn't run. It scrambled, its limbs clicking against the metal like a giant insect. I scrambled back up the stairs, my lungs burning. I could hear it behind me, the wet thwack of its hands hitting the steps. The worst part was that as it climbed, it was laughing. but it was laughing with my father's laugh. The watchman's office. I made it back into the office and slammed the steel bolt shut, just as a heavy weight slammed into the door. The entire structure seemed to shudder. I backed away, tripwiring over my own chair. I scrambled to the center of the room, surrounded by the panoramic windows. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows over the cornfields. Then, the scratching began. It wasn't on the door anymore. It was on the roof. I looked up. Through the skylight, I saw a pale, multi-jointed hand press against the glass. The fingers were unnaturally long, with ragged, dirty nails. It began to circle the exterior of the glass office, hanging onto the narrow ledge 60 feet in the air. I watched its silhouette move, a dark, spindly shape against the fading purple sky. It stopped right in front of the main window. It pressed its featureless face against the glass. Then, it spoke. It didn't use Caleb's voice. It didn't use my father's. It used mine. "Miller?" it said, perfectly mimicking the way I had greeted the supervisor a week ago. "Yeah, I'm all set. Thanks for the opportunity." It began to tap on the glass. One tap for every syllable. Tap, 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 tap. "I'm all alone up here," it whispered in my voice. "No one can hear me, the unresolved." It's been 3 hours. The sun is completely gone now. The only light in the room comes from the dim green glow of the radio dial. I'm sitting in the middle of the floor, holding the knife, staring at the door. The scratching on the roof has stopped, which is almost worse than when it was happening. A few minutes ago, the radio crackled to life. "Hey, you there?" It was Miller's voice. It sounded real. It sounded relieved. "I'm at the gate. I forgot to give you the keys to the storage shed. Come on down and let me in." I looked at the gate through my binoculars. There are no headlights. The fields are pitch black. The radio crackled again. "I know you're awake," Miller's voice said. But then, it shifted within the same sentence. The voice transitioned from Miller to Caleb to me. "Come down and let us in." I'm looking at the door handle now. It's starting to turn. Slowly. Very slowly. I don't know who is on the other side of that door. I don't know if Miller is even alive. All I know is that the thing on the roof is quiet because it's waiting for me to listen to the voice on the radio. And the most terrifying part isn't the man in the slicker or the voices of the dead. It's that I'm starting to forget what my own voice is supposed to sound like.